Pudge.
Let me get one thing clear. Pudge is not a support. Pudge is not a mid laner, he is not an off laner, and he's not a carry. As the face of Dota 2, Pudge is Pudge, and Pudge does what Pudge wants. And if someone wants to pick Boss 5 Pudge, god damn it, he's gonna pick Boss 5 Pudge. And if you would disagree with this placement in this video, don't blame me, blame democracy. Let's get into his kit. Pudge's innate gives him extra strength every time an enemy hero dies nearby. That means more HP, regen, and right-click damage per kill. Note, he doesn't have to get the kill. Heck, he doesn't even need a takedown. He just has to be near the enemy when they die to get the extra strength. Pudge's hook is his most iconic ability. He shoots a hook, pulling back the first target hit. That means enemy or ally, mind you. If you hit an enemy, it deals pure damage and usually results in a kill. If you hit an ally, you either save their life or grief them, no in between. Pudge insta-kills creeps when hitting them with a hook, so use them on range, siege, or big jungle creeps to secure their bounty. The facet Flayer's hook increases the hook's range, projectile speed, and damage potential. This facet rewards players for hitting max range hooks while lowering the ability's damage floor, and in my opinion, it's the absolutely better facet for Boss 5 Pudge, and we'll get to why I think that later. Pudge's Rot is his main damage tool. He creates a slowing, damaging aura around him, and this can be toggled on or off. It has no mana cost or cooldown, but it does have a health cost, meaning Pudge will take damage by using this ability. Aghanims gives him increased Rot damage and radius, and also reduces enemy regen and healing. Really good on core Pudge, questionable on support because it also increases the damage you do to yourself. His third skill, Meat Shield, makes him block a flat amount of damage from all sources for a short amount of time. It also blocks Rot damage, and you can use it while using Pudge's ult. Dismember is a short-range channeled stun that deals damage to a target and pulls them closer to the big boy. Pudge can also toggle Rot during this period without breaking the channel, and it also deals extra damage based on Pudge's strength. Pudge's other facet, Fresh Meat, gives Pudge increased strength for a short period of time based on how much damage your Dismember does. And I think you shouldn't be going this facet on Pudge as a support because of his shard, which allows him to eat teammates, making them untargetable and giving them substantially increased regen. It's Dota's version of Tahm Kench's ult from League. It also reduces the cooldown a bit. It is up there with False Promise and Shallow Grave as one of the best saves in the game, and you should be using it as such. The reason why I like Flayer's hook over Fresh Meat is because when using Fresh Meat as a save, you get zero benefit from this facet, and the increased hook range and damage potential of a max hook is much better as a 5. The extra strength is nice to have, but you won't be benefiting much from it if you're using Dismember as a save instead of a damage tool. Like Blitzcrank in League, support Pudge isn't all that tanky. You get some tankiness and you won't get instantly blown up, but you're actually incredibly susceptible to sustained damage. You may have a big character model and a lot of HP, but you likely won't have the armor from items to make you a real tank. That's why you'd rather be in the backlines throwing out hooks and peeling for teammates with your shard ult. For talents, armor at 10, hook damage at 15 to remove the drawback from flares, hook cooldown at 20, heap and meat shield at 25. Pudge as a support plays entirely around his hook and is a coin flip of a pick. If you can't land them consistently in lane, you will lose every single trade, but if you can, try to hook them into tower range and win the lane from there. As a snowball hero, you need to get kills to be useful, and if you don't, you'd be better off as almost any other support. Remember that sometimes the threat of a hook is more dangerous than the hook itself. Avoid showing yourself on the enemy's screen by playing around trees and fog, and if you're gonna hook a creep, at least hit the ranged creep, flag bearer, or siege creep to secure the bounty. Pudge hates sustained damage dealers. Enemy carries that can chew through his HP bar like Lifestealer, Troll Warlord, Drow Ranger, and Juggernaut will absolutely melt you like the fat butterball you are. Pick support Pudge when you need a save, and for some reason Dazzle, Oracle, Vengeful Spirit, and Shadow Demon are all banned. Speaking of that last guy,
Shadow Demon.
one of the more uncommon picks in pubs, Shadow Demon is a pick that trades instant burst for insane utility. Menace is Shadow Demon's innate. With every auto attack, SD applies a stacking damage vulnerability debuff on an enemy. Honestly, a really good passive, making SD excel in long trades. He has another passive ability if he chooses the Shadow Servant facet, causing enemy heroes that die near him to spawn an illusion on death, lasting until they respawn. If you have a teamfight heavy lineup, this is the better facet. If you win a fight, you have extra health to take objectives. His third ability, Shadow Poison, is his main damage tool. He sends out a wave of shadows that deal a bit of impact damage, and they apply a stacking poison debuff to all enemies hit. This can be detonated to deal extra damage based on the number of stacks a target has. There's a lot of math behind this ability, and I'm not going to get into it, but you want to hit 5 stacks on a target, and then they go boom. Disseminate is Shadow Demon's second ability. Casting on a target causes a percentage of all damage they take to be dispersed onto nearby enemies. It can be used on both teammates and opponents. With the Promulgate facet, the target loses 15% of their health if they're an enemy and gains 15% extra health if they're an ally. This one's a more general pick and is always good. Disruption is Shadow Demon's Q and most versatile spell. Targeting a hero, regardless of whether it's an ally, enemy, or even himself, SD banishes the target to the Shadow Realm for a few seconds. When they come back, they're accompanied by 2 illusions of that same hero. Use it on allies to save them, enemies to set up stunts, or reserve it for specific heroes to make illusions out of them. Demonic Purge is Shadow Demon's ultimate. It dispels most buffs from a target enemy and continues to do so for a few seconds. The target is also applied a heavy but decaying slow, and after some time, the Purge detonates, dealing massive damage. With the Shard, SD gets Demonic Cleanse, a version of this ability that can be used on allies. It instead cleanses most debuffs but not stuns on a target teammate. Then a heal is applied at the end. Aghanim Scepter gives you 2 charges of both abilities and causes Demonic Purge to disable a target's passives. For talent, Shadow Poison damage at 10, Shadow Poison cooldown at 15, Demonic Purge damage / heal at 20, and Demonic Purge cooldown at 25, but the disruption charges are also good if you feel like you need it. On his own, SD is an alright hero. He doesn't excel at anything in particular and isn't the most consistent pick. However, where he really shines is as a synergy or counter pick. Because disruption creates illusions of the target, he wants to be paired with attribute carries or ones with abilities that benefit illusions, like Terrorblade and Luna. Disruption is also a great setup ability for spells like Mirana's Arrow and Kunkka's Torrent. Demonic Purge completely screws over most melee carries, namely Sven, Phantom Assassin, and Ursa. Within Ags, that list expands to heroes like Bristleback and Spectre as well. A special mention goes to Faceless Void because Shadow Demon can disrupt heroes in his chrono, wasting his time. He doesn't do particularly well into ranged heroes because he has no mobility and little range on his kit outside of Shadow Poison. In fact, because he takes a while to rack up damage, he's not a particularly strong laner. Shadow Poison is just too mana intensive early on to be spammed effectively. Pause 4s that can whittle him down over a series of short trades like Hoodwink, or pause 4s that just full send it all the fucking time like Spirit Breaker just kinda ruin his laning stage. If you're using him to play around illusions, Lion has 2 ways of deleting them from the game via his mana drain and Hex. All that being said, he's a pick that brings a lot of utility to a team. Just make sure your team actually needs that utility in the first place. Now, before I move on to the next hero, I want to mention that Shadow Demon's innate works on illusions, and I'm just gonna leave this clip here.
Shaman.
This guy's kinda messed up in the head because he has a bird fetish and he likes it when people are disabled. Let's get into his kit. His Q, Ether Shock, is your standard nuking spell, point and click burst of damage that forks to nearby targets. His E is his Shackles. It's a channeled stun with a long duration and some chip damage thrown in there as well. It's like the Walmart version of Bane's Fiend's Grip, which is still pretty good. To make the spell even better, he can buy a shard to spawn serpent wards around the target and increase the cast range by just a bit. His W is Hex. Functionally, it is exactly the same as Lion's, instant point and click CC, and turns the enemy into a harmless critter. But with a Cluster Cluck facet, he can target allies with Hex to cleanse debuffs and spawn a bunch of chickens. Additionally, there's a very small period after hexing a teammate that makes them invulnerable, which is good for cleansing things like Fiend's Grip. But wow, instead of your carry being Grip, they're a harmless chicken instead. Very niche usage, so you actually want to get the facet for the other component instead. Speaking of, his innate is Foul Play. Upon taking lethal damage, instead of dying outright, Shadow Shaman turns himself into a chicken with 1 HP for a few seconds. He has about a second's worth of invulnerability in this form, and if he survives, he lives and this ability goes on cooldown. When turning into a chicken, he also cleanses most debuffs, including stuns. With Cluster Cluck, he makes more chickens. You might think this is a meme passive, but it's actually quite good. It prevents him from dying to things like damage over time spells and burst damage combos. Mass Serpent Wards is Shadow Shaman's ultimate. He summons 10 Serpent Wards in a circular pattern to deal massive damage to enemy forces. Because they're static, they're not too amazing in a teamfight, but they work great for destroying towers and objectives. Because of the way they spawn, you can ward trap enemies, preventing them from moving out unless they kill a ward or 2. Now, the wards are glass cannons and they die in just a few hits. To fix this, Shaman can get massive Serpent Ward to create 1 big boy instead of 10 small ones. They have functionally the same usage and the same numbers, but it's just harder to kill. Though, I still prefer Cluster Cluck because ward trapping is fun. With Ags, the wards have split shot, attacking 2 targets for full damage. For talents, I recommend mana regen at 10, ward range at 15, ward HP at 20, unless they have something like a Bristleback or Spectre, then go Hex Breaks and ward damage at 25. Your wards will die a lot in the late game, but you do have a way of creating more with your shard. Shadow Shaman is a powerful support that is welcome in pretty much any team comp. He has so much lockdown, he might as well be named 2020, and he pushes harder than a pregnant woman creating the beautiful gift of life.
Silencer.
Ever wanted to tell your opponents to shut the fuck up? Well, now you can. In fact, that's all Silencer really does. Silencer passively steals intelligence from enemies that die around him. Just like Pudge, he doesn't need to be part of the takedown, he just needs to be in the area. This int steal persists throughout the rest of the game, and with Shard, you bump up the amount of int stolen. This isn't retroactively applied, so the sooner you get the Shard, the better. His first facet prevents Silencer from being silenced. It has some niche uses against heroes like Puck and Orchid users, but unless you're playing carry Silencer with Mask of Madness, it's kind of underwhelming as a whole, especially compared to his other one. His first spell is Arcane Curse. You curse targets in an area, applying a debuff that damages targets and slows them. If they cast a spell, they're silenced and the debuff duration is paused. It's a nasty spell in a teamfight, outright preventing enemies from executing full combos. Silencer's glaives can be toggled on or off. When turned on, his autos deal extra magic damage based on his intelligence, and after hitting an enemy with 4 glaive hits in quick succession, he silences them. It's kind of whatever early on, but with more int from kills, he can actually become a potent semi-carry. But in lane, you're going to want to use this to orb walk, which is the act of manually casting each glaive to prevent yourself from drawing aggro. Buying a shard also increases the int steal and the steal duration. Silencer's third ability is a passive. With Last Word, silence targets around Silencer take damage and are slowed. The more silences on a target, the more damage it does. This makes Silencer synergize with other heroes that have silences in their kit, like Puck or Natural Orchid buyers. Silencer's ultimate is Global Silence. It silences every single enemy on the map. It also pierces debuff immunity. With Aghanim Scepter, he applies Arcane Curse to all targets when he casts Global Silence. it's actually not that good of an ultimate in the mid to late game when enemies can just dispel the silence with items like Yule's BKB and Lotus Orb. That's why I think Reverberating Silence is a straight up better facet. With it, the first time a target dispels global silence from another person, they're also applied a shorter silence. This means that targets that can't just pop BKB after your ult and nullify your best spell. Silencer has great poke and harass in lane, but if the enemy can get on top of him, he's just dead because he's squishy and has zero mobility. He also kinda needs levels to function, making him a rather difficult support to play early on. In fact, because of his lack of hard lockdown, he's kind of a hard support to play. He's best picked as a deny or counter pick against heroes like Enigma, Bane, and Invoker. For talents, curse damage at 10, silence cooldown at 15, undispellable curse at 20, and double charges at 25. I already miss you so much, last word mutes. With all his silences, Silencer can stop an entire team from using their spells, either by applying the silence debuff or by making them lose so much intelligence that you turn them into someone that picks boss 5 Pudge.
Snapfire!
Snaps the name, Burst is her game. You want to play a support that can blow people up but got filled to position 5? Snapfire is a great pick. Her innate means that Snapfire passively has 25% more attack damage, with the drawback that every now and then she'll fire a weak shot that deals less damage. Her facet, Ricochet 2, causes her weak attacks and misses to bounce off the target to nearby ones instead. Her Scatter Blast is her first spell, and it's her boomstick. She fires a wide shotgun blast in front of her, dealing more damage to targets closer to her. Her full bore facet narrows the shotgun blast, making it fire over a longer distance instead and dealing more damage to further targets instead of closer ones. I like this one because it makes Snap play more like a long-range poke hero. Like the deranged grandma that she is, she can also feed her teammates a fire snap cookie, causing them to hop forward, dealing damage and stunning in the landing area. With a shard, cookies will also heal the target in addition to launching a fireball in the landing area that deals extra damage and applies a slow. It's pretty good. Her third ability, Little Shredder, gives her bonus attack speed and attack range for a set amount of shots at the cost of limiting her damage output. The attack speed makes her great against heroes that have hit counter abilities like Undying, Zeus, and of course Phoenix. And finally, her ultimate is Mortimer Kisses, where she fires a bunch of fireballs that deal damage and slow targets in a targeted area with incredible range, but she can't move during the duration. It's kind of like Xerath ult from League, and no Dota copied League here because Xerath came out years before Snapfire did. She has a really weird Ags, which I call the Eat and Yeet, where she gobbles up either a creep or allied hero and yeets them over a long distance, stunning enemies in the landing AoE and dealing a bit of damage. It's a very niche Agonims, but it's still technically a save, so it's worth mentioning, but I can't always recommend it. For talents, I think Scatter Blast damage at 10 for the early game burst, Cookie cooldown at 15 for more stuns and mobility, Kisses damage at 20, and extra Kisses at 25. If you're playing as a 4 Snapfire, I could see an argument for the Shredder talents if the game looks like it will go late, but for a 5, you usually want to play around your other abilities instead. Snap is a great pick if your team needs some damage. She also provides every teammate with a bit of mobility since her cookies give allies a free dash. She doesn't have any particular counters, but she hates dive heroes that can just run her down and silence her for cancelling her ult. She trades well in lane unless you get unlucky with her passive procs and likes to link up with melee carries that can get in range to stun with her cookie. Shout out to Faceless Void though, because she's kinda everything he wants in a woman with her lane pressure, CC, and chrono damage.
Treant Protector.
Arguably the best lane bully in the game, and he's a goddamn tree. Treant's defining characteristic isn't a skill or anything but his base damage. His auto attacks alone hit harder than an Asian mother with a child who gets bad grades and is stronger than most level 1 nukes. He can boost this up with his facet, Primeval Power, giving him extra base damage per level. The numbers are subject to change, but at the time of this video, that's plus 20 damage just at level 4 without items or anything. That's about 1,000 golds worth of damage, and in the early game, that's pretty damn good value. Get this facet if all you care about is winning lane. Moving on to his kit, Treant's innate is Nature's Guise, giving him tree walking when not taking damage and bonus move speed around trees. With a shard, he also gains invisibility around trees, which he can break with an auto attack to entangle an enemy and deal extra damage. His first spell, Nature's Grasp, summons a line of vines in front of him. The vines deal damage and slow targets caught inside, and they deal more damage as long as the vines are touching a tree at any point. His second spell is Leech Seed. It shoots seeds at the enemy Pokemon and deals a bit of damage every turn, healing your Oh, wait a second, sorry, wrong video game. This spell shoots a seed at the target enemy and deals a bit of damage every tick, healing units around the seeded target. It also applies a slow. With the sapling facet, Treant can target a leech seed on the ground where it damages and heals all nearby units instead of just damaging a single target. This can also combo with Nature's Grasp to get the bonus tree damage. And if you're gonna do this, tree first, then vines, never the other way around. Better facet in most cases. His third spell, Living Armor, gives a target an armor buff and extra regen. It has global range and can be used on towers. Always, always, always use this ability whenever you can, either healing a teammate for some chip damage, helping your carry stay healthy while farming, or restoring a tower. It has a dirt cheap mana cost and lasts quite a while. His ultimate, Overgrowth, is an AoE root that deals damage. It's just a root so enemies can dispel it later on in the game. Sure, it pierces BKB, but compared to other teamfight spells like warping the goddamn space-time continuum, channeling the unbridled power of the sun, or summoning a literal black hole, this one is just okay. Eyes in the Forest is Treant's Ags upgrade. You bless a tree and that tree now acts as a ward, giving you flying vision over it. permanently until it gets chopped down. It also causes all trees on the map to respawn much faster. When Treant uses Overgrowth, the Overgrowth is also cast around every single blessed tree. Vision is everything in Dota, which makes this one of the best ags in the game on paper, but in most cases you're never gonna get it. You're either already winning or you're rushing it and kinda trolling your team by not getting other items. For talents, I would get Grasp cooldown at 10, Grasp damage at 25, Living Armor bonus at 20, and AoE Living Armor at 25. Don't underestimate 18 armor when defending your high ground or taking a team fight. As Treant, you dominate lane. With your insane base damage, slows, and sustain, you have all the tools necessary to destroy your opponent in the early game. Except hard CC, but we don't talk about that. In terms of counters, he hates Timbersaw because you can't play around trees if there are no trees to play around, and Dispellers like Oracle. But he also generally hates playing into scaling lineups because he is just not that strong later on. Pick him with a carry that can kill in lane like Juggernaut, Gyro, or Monkey King and get like 5 kills before the first 10 minutes every single game.
The Undying waits.
Another tanky pos 5 that can absolutely dominate the lane. Instead of absurd base damage, Undying has some of the strongest spells in the laning stage. Undying's innate makes him instantly respawn after dying. It starts the game on cooldown and it has a really long one. It's actually pretty good because it allows Undying to play a lot more recklessly. I know I clowned on Lion's passive for not giving anything unless he dies, but this innate is different because it functions as Undying getting multiple lives. His lane pressure comes from his first spell, Decay. Targeting an area, Undying deals damage and saps the strength attribute of enemy heroes and giving it to Undying for some time. This reduces the enemy's max HP. He can hit multiple heroes with this ability, giving insane levels of tankiness early on. With an Ags, the strength steal is doubled. Really good against lineups with a lot of strength heroes, but kinda hard to get on support. Soul Rip is his second spell. It's a point and click ability that either deals damage to an enemy or heals a teammate. Its power scales with the number of units, that's both enemies and allies, around Undying when cast. The more units there are, the more powerful the effect. And with the ripped facet, Undying also gives teammates a portion of his strength when cast on them. This one's better. It's literally free stats for your team. Tombstone is Undying's ultimate that isn't an ultimate. He summons a pillar that in turn summons uncontrollable zombies to attack nearby enemies. The zombies apply a slow on hit, and when their target is low enough, they gain a speed boost. Zombies die in a single auto attack and are largely unaffected by spells, kinda like Yorick from League, except they don't hit towers. The real power of this ability comes from the slow and the vision that the zombies give. The Tombstone doesn't have an HP bar and instead has a hit counter much like Phoenix's egg, but unlike the egg, you can soul rip the Tombstone to heal it. Shard turns the Tombstone into somewhat of a protective bunker. Teammates can hide inside the Tombstone, protecting themselves against enemies. Only one teammate can fit inside though. It doesn't have a lot of space, and Undying forgot to buy the galvanized square steel and eco-friendly wood veneers. Undying's ultimate, Flesh Golem, gives him a gym membership and he becomes swole as all hell. As a Swolem, he gains bonus strength and movement speed, and his attacks apply a damage amp debuff and slow. If he takes the Rotten Mitts facet, he also spawns a zombie with every hit when he's pumped. For talents, my recommendations are Tombstone cooldown at 10, Soul Rip damage at 15, but the zombie damage is nice if it doesn't get deleted in every fight. Decay cooldown at 20 because you shouldn't be dying enough to get a Tombstone on death talent, and Tomb hits at 25. Undying is this hard to kill wall of flesh that thrives in both lane and in a team fight. His ganks aren't that good, but as a pos 5 that doesn't matter too much. You win lane for your carry and make a lot of space in lane and completely run over the enemy against the right lineup. He has no hard CC though, so hopefully that comes elsewhere in your draft. He also hates ranged carries because if they play keep away properly, Undying can't do much against them as they destroy his beloved Tombstone.
Vengeful Spirit.
Another incredibly versatile pick, Vengeful Spirit offers value to her team purely by existing and sometimes even by not. Her innate makes her deal increased damage to the last enemy that killed her. Another on death passive, but it kinda works on Venge because of how the rest of her kit works. She's normally a ranged hero, but she does have a facet that makes her a melee hero with increased attack range like Monkey King. It also speeds up her attack animation. It's probably better on carry Venge. Her first spell is Magic Missile. It's a point and click stun that deals damage. With the Avenging Missile facet, it deals increased damage for every creep that the target has killed, the better talent in most scenarios. With Shard, the missile also bounces to a nearby target. Wave of Terror is Venge's second spell and her primary trading tool. She shoots a long-range wave that deals chip damage and reduces enemy armor and damage to all units along this path. It also grants vision over the AoE. Arguably her most useful ability, great for scouting, great for fighting, great for farming and stacking. It's just really nice to have. Vengeance Aura is her third ability. It's a passive aura that gives all nearby allied heroes increased attack damage. And finally, Nether Swap is her ultimate. It's a point and click ability that forces your target to swap locations with Venge. Enemies get damaged while Venge and allies, if they're the swap target, get a barrier. Defensively, you want to pull a teammate out of a sticky situation, trading your life for your carries. Offensively, you want to use this ability on a key target on the enemy team to catch them out. Usually though, this results in trading your life for the enemy carries, thus as a hero, you're pretty much designed to die. Which is what makes her Aghanims so interesting. Upon death, she creates a special illusion of herself. Unlike most illusions, it can cast spells and gain experience as normal, but when Venge respawns, she takes the place of her another illusion if it's still alive. Now, if you want to get a bit deeper, the Ag's illusion is coded as a separate unit, thus has separate cooldowns to Vengeful herself. In practice, this means you can swap a target in, stun, die, then instantly stun and swap again. It's pretty much a second life, and it messes with the enemy because it forces them to hesitate. Venge is one of the rare cases where you actually kind of want to get Ags just because of the value. That being said, she does have her weaknesses, mainly the fact that she has dog wave clear and does nothing against groups of enemies. Besides that, Venge fits well into most compositions, but really well in physical damage comps or against heroes that want to isolate a target like Faceless Void or Legion Commander. For talents, missile range at 10 if you want offense, swap talent if you want defense, missile stun duration at 15 unless you're in a minus armor team, missile cooldown at 20, and swap cooldown at 25, and I highly recommend her for new players.
Venomancer.
The most toxic hero in this game, Venom's whole shtick is being really annoying to play against, and this is the case because of his innate poison sting. Passively, it makes all of his attacks slow targets and deal damage over time. It also functions as a second ability. This ability is upgraded with an Aghanim Scepter, which causes enemies to take increased damage from Venom's attacks based on the number of debuffs they have on them. But his first ability is Venomous Gale. Venom shoots a blast of poison in front of him. The poison applies a strong decaying slow and deals great damage. Landing this ability usually results in a kill. The debuff is dispellable, but if Venom gets a shard, targets who dispel the debuff will take burst damage and get stunned. His third ability is Plague Ward. He summons a toxic ward that attacks nearby enemies, applying a weaker version of his poison sting. They're wards, so they grant vision over an area. They won't kill you unless you're already low, but they're really annoying because they cancel blinks and break salves. With the Plague Carrier facet, Venom gets 3 charges of his wards and can put them on allies. Noxious Plague is Venom's final ability. It's a point-and-click debuff that slows a target and all enemies around it. When the target dies or the debuff expires, it spreads to nearby enemies. With the Patient Zero facet, the debuff spreads an additional time. It is the much stronger facet. Take it every game. For talents, I prefer Gale CD at 10 for increased aggression, Poison Sting slow at 15, Plague damage at 20, and stronger wards at 25 to actually make them useful in terms of dealing damage. Venomancer deals great damage over time and excels in short trades where all he has to do is apply his debuffs then run away, but he's a really easy target to pick off with his low base movement speed and lack of mobility tools. He's a typical backline caster that is countered by divers. Veno is a solid pick in most games, but he lacks hard lockdown in his base kit, thus heroes that have a built-in escape like Slark, Faceless Void, and Mirana should mostly be fine against him. He is also garbage against debuff immunity, so heroes like Lifestealer and Omni Knight kinda screw him over. For synergies, he does well with your typical aggressive early game carries, and is a strong pick against Blink initiators like Axe, Magnus, and Earthshaker because of his wards. Warlock is a one-man teamfight, as long as his abilities are off cooldown. At the start of the game, Warlock can choose the Black Grimoire facet, giving him a consumable item that gives him bonus experience for every kill he participates in. This means if he can get active early, he can get some pretty good level power spikes. Probably better on a core lock though. His first ability is Fatal Bonds, aka the I win lane button. It bonds enemies in an AoE together, causing them to share a portion of all damage taken. Use it on the enemy laner when they're near the creep wave for free damage. This spell single-handedly makes Warlock a powerful laner, letting him win without even really needing to trade. But when he needs to start throwing hands, he has his second ability, Shadow Word. It's a point-and-click ability that deals damage or heals over time when cast on an enemy or ally respectively. This effect also spills onto nearby targets. Warlock's third spell is Upheaval. It's a channeled ability that deals damage and slows in an area, and this ramps up over time. For his innate, enemies who die under the effect of Warlock's abilities spawn an imp in their place, which run toward the closest enemy and explode to deal damage. With a shard, these imps deal more damage, and Upheaval now also spawns imps during the channel. For his ultimate, Warlock gets Chaotic Offering, stunning enemies in a huge AoE and summoning a golem that burns nearby enemies. For talents, I recommend Fatal Bonds damage at 10, Upheaval attack speed at 15 for better pushing, Golem on death at 20 as an insurance policy against divers, but take the other one if they're not a threat in the game, and the 25 talent depends on your matchup. The armor is usually better though because it helps against towers. Warlock's game plan is as simple as day. Win the fight with his AoE control and damage, and then push with whatever health your golems have left. Unlike other supports, Warlock scales incredibly well into the late game and only grows in power as more items get bought. Warlock actually has a bit of a bell curve when it comes to his timings. He's strong in lane, but weak in the mid game, and then becomes strong again in the late game if you can survive. He has no mobility nor burst damage. Jump on him and he sorta just dies. Chaotic Offering also has an insanely long cooldown, so enemies that can play up tempo and fight often with mid game power spikes like Quap and Puck can be problematic to face. For synergies, you want a carry that covers his weaknesses, namely hard lockdown, burst damage, skirmishing, and mid-game strength. For me, that's Monkey King.
Winter Wyvern.
Winter Waifu is an incredibly versatile support with some of the most unique spells in the game. Her innate gives her team more value out of wisdom runes. This means everyone gets XP from them instead of just 2 people on the team. Really useful over the course of the game. Her first spell is a buff that gives her flying move speed and increased attack range for a short amount of time. Her attacks also apply a slow and deal damage based on the enemy's max health, but this debuff can only be applied once per unit. Great for trading in lane and harassing the enemy laner. With Aghanim Scepter, she can toggle this ability on or off, removing the debuff limit and draining mana each second. Don't toggle it willy-nilly though, because it still has a mana cost on cast. Her Dragon Sight facet gives her extra damage based on her bonus attack range. It's not really worth building around as a support, so leave this for the core players. Her second ability, Splinter Blast, is a point-and-click nuke that damages and slows the enemy around a target but not the target itself. It can be used on both enemies and allies. Her third ability is Cold Embrace. It renders a target ally completely immobile, but also heals them and makes them immune to physical damage. With the essence of the Blue Heart facet, the spell also restores mana. With her shard, the ability's cooldown is reduced, and it also spawns a bunch of ice splinters to attack nearby foes once it ends. A good rule of thumb is to use it outside of combat or as a save against physical damage dealers. Otherwise, don't get too trigger happy with it because you're still stunning a teammate for 4 seconds. Her ultimate is Winter's Curse. She targets an enemy and causes all nearby enemy units to attack the target, rendering everyone immobile, giving them an attack speed buff. However, during this spell, teammates cannot deal damage to the enemies, but Winter Wyvern can. In fact, her damage to cursed targets is amplified. The duration of this ability scales off of the number of units affected, so the more, the merrier. Please coordinate this spell with your teammates first. You do not want to mess up your teammates' initiation just because you used your Winter's Curse. For talents, get Cold Embrace heal at 10, Splinter Blast radius at 15, Splinter Blast damage at 20, and Splinter Blast stun at 25. She's amazing against grouped up enemies and heroes that rely on numbers to be effective, like Beastmaster, Lycan, and of course, Meepo. Her counters are enemies that can save cursed targets. Oracle, Omni Knight, Dazzle, and even Pugna can completely ruin her initiation.
Witch Doctor.
And finally, we've made it to the last hero whom I would consider as a 5, the king of the damage charts himself, Witch Doctor. His innate is the Gris, a unique item that passively gains gold and stores all the gold that Witch Doctor loses upon death. At any point, Witch Doctor can consume the Gris to give him all the gold that it has collected. The main strategy for this item is to just let it accumulate gold, and then when you're closer enough to buy a power spike item like Aghanim Scepter, you use it and then hit your spike. It's pretty much free gold and better than most insurance plans in real life. His cask is his first ability. It stuns and deals chip damage and hurts more against creeps. It also bounces between targets and can bounce to the same target multiple times. It's a bit of an inconsistent ability, but under the right circumstances, it's an amazing lockdown spell. With the Headhunter facet, this ability deals increased damage with every bounce, and it's good for fighting and farming during downtime. His second spell is Voodoo Restoration. It is a toggle ability that heals nearby teammates at the cost of Witch Doctor's mana. He can choose the Voodoo Festoration facet for it to deal damage to enemies instead. It's too mana intensive for the damage it deals, and the fact that it won't heal anymore is a huge letdown. Maledict is Witch Doctor's third spell. It's a debuff that deals damage over time, but it also deals extra damage based on how much health the target has lost since affected by the debuff. It can deal a surprising amount of damage, and this spell is not to be underestimated, especially when comboed with his ult. Death Ward is the reason Witch Doctor can single-handedly win a teamfight if left unchecked. When using this ability, Witch Doctor channels a Death Ward that deals pure damage to a single target, and 2 if he chooses the Cleft Death facet. It also has increased accuracy, meaning it will sometimes ignore evasion mechanics. This spell deals insane amounts of damage, and with an Aghanim Scepter, its attacks bounce between nearby units. With an AoE control spell, it's the freest rampage ever. For his shard, Witch Doctor turns into a weaker Death Ward with reduced attack speed, becoming untargetable for the duration. It's a nice get-off-me tool. For talents, I like to get Voodoo mana at 10, Cast Bounces at 15, Death Ward attack range at 20, and Death Ward damage at 25. I would say that he's more than just his ultimate, but his ultimate just makes winning a teamfight so easy. That being said, he's hard countered by silences. Silencer, Puck, and Ricky are all great picks against him just to prevent him from getting off the full duration of his ultimate. For synergies, anyone with an AoE stun is great. Faceless Void and Witch Doctor, while not as good as it used to be, is still a great combo along with your standard Magnus and Darkseer. All that being said, Witch Doctor is a feast or famine support, not offering much compared to other supports if he can't get a great Death Ward off. Still, I wouldn't mind having him on my team. And now you know how to play every POS 5 in the game, you're welcome. But this series isn't over yet, because I still got POS 4s waiting to be covered. That being said, go watch the previous entries in the series if you haven't already, and my other work if you're interested. Leave a like if you learned something, a comment if you want to say something, and a sub if you haven't already. That's all for now, ace out.